Hi, good morning, good morning. How's everyone doing today? Everyone's got their coffee. First thing in the morning, talking about AI. What a beautiful venue. Huge congratulations to Jackson and all these folks who have helped us to put this event together today, and thanks everyone for joining. My name is David Tibbitts, and the very grandiose title of my presentation today is The Next Waves of AI, Retrieval-Augmented Generation and Beyond. I lead our AI marketing efforts at Notion and excited to chat with y'all today. So what are we going to learn today? Raise your hand if you are a Notion user or know what Notion is. That's fantastic. Love to see that. So whether you have never heard of Notion before or you've been using Notion for years, I hope that you will learn something new today. We'll be talking about how Notion came to be and how it sort of evolved over time. Additionally, I have participated in a couple of what we call tier 1 launches for AI features over the past 12 months and would love to share sort of my learnings from those launches with everyone here today. And then finally, as marketers, would love to chat about how we all can leverage AI and retrieval-augmented generation workflows in our day-to-day work. So, why was Notion created in the first place? This is Ivan. Ivan is Notion's CEO and founder, and Ivan is a very hip guy. In college, he was a photography minor, and he had lots of hip friends. Designers, photographers, artists, and by the time that he got to the end of college and all his friends were graduating, they all had the same question for him, which is, can you help me build my portfolio? Can you make me a website? Because he was the only person in the friend group who actually knew how to code and actually design and build a website for his friends. And so eventually he thought, why am I doing all the work? What if we actually gave people the tools to build their own software, and sort of having this realization that the rules is completely disproportionate. And he started to think about a tool that would democratize this ability to customize your own software that had previously been gated to these few special developers. And so in 2013, the first version of Notion was released, and it looked a little bit like this. And we see that even in the first versions of Notion, everything was sort of broken up into this block-based layout. And this was his attempt at sort of making software where everything was customizable. You see that there's even a Stripe invoice block. This was definitely meant to be like a create your own website builder kind of a vibe. And this product was completely, universally unsuccessful. The number one learning that he had from these first few years of really trying to iterate on Notion is that nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to build their own software, even though he was trying to give people their own tools. Don't you want to build your own software yourself instead of working with a developer? And it's sort of like the person who is really creative with most people want is to walk into a store and browse a collection of pre-built use cases so that you can see what's possible. You can pick the one that you want. And sure, you can customize it if you like, but this is more of the vibe of what people wanted in their software. And in order to, in terms of these 3 specific use cases, first being, hey, use Notion for notes and docs and replace Google Docs and Evernote with Notion. Secondly, use Notion as your team knowledge base and wiki as a replacement for Confluence. And then the third Lego box was have all of your tasks, your project management, your Trello workflow, your Asana and Jira workflows. You'll see this same sort of resonate and continue on in the way that we talk about Notion today. This is from Notion's homepage. Today, we still talk about ourselves as a connected workspace for your docs and notes, your projects, and your knowledge, all from the same tool. Then in March 2018, they shipped an important new Lego block in the collection of Notion building blocks, which was the database block. And this really started to unlock even more use cases of your project management workflows and just increase what you could do with the tool. And this is when Notion, 5 years after that original version, really started to achieve its product market fit. And when the company really started to take off like a rocket ship, you'll see here in March of 2018, when Notion was written about in the Wall Street Journal. And then 8 months later is when I joined. We were a 10-person company at the time, 10 weirdos working out of a garage in San Francisco. And over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to work on a number of different shapes and sizes of launches at Notion. I've seen us sort of expand the reach of the product via pricing. A couple years after I joined, rather than charging users to unlock unlimited storage, in 2020 we said, you know what, everybody gets unlimited storage for free, and sort of expanded our reach of how many people were able to use the tool. We also expanded our reach via language. Our first non-English language was in Korean, and then over the past few years, we've, of course, expanded to other languages as well. We have done a couple of things in terms of the capabilities of the product, and I like to think of this as both raising the skill ceiling of the product as well as lowering the skill floor. And so we raised the skill ceiling by shipping a public API so that people who are developers were able to build even more complex and automated workflows in Notion. But as a marketer, what gets me a little bit more excited is when we make the product more intuitive, more seamless for absolutely everyone to use it. And you can imagine how frustrating it was when you typed /table in your Notion page, and every single time it spat out this really complicated and complex database. It felt kind of like using a Lamborghini for your grocery shopping if really you just wanted a grid on your page, a couple columns and a couple of rows. And so I was really excited about this launch of dumb tables. You know, yes, you can still have your complicated database tables, but now we have dumb tables as well. And this helped to sort of lower the skill floor for the product. And enterprise stuff is sort of the other category of launches, moving up market and really making sure that Notion as a product did not break when more than 500 people were sharing a workspace, or 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and making sure that we had permissions and security and compliance features that scaled. And all of this led up to the end of 2022, during what I'd like to call sort of the first wave of AI. And that first wave of AI, everyone was really taken aback by its ability to generate content, to make stuff for you. Its ability to generate text, generate videos, generate code, generate music. And what is, in my opinion, probably one of the first viral images that had people truly fooled that everyone thought the Pope was so incredibly drippy. This moment for generative AI happened at the end of 2022, and it just so happened that Notion was taking a all-company offsite at that time. And our two co-founders, Ivan and Simon, chose to exploit this opportunity of having no meetings, no executive alignment to deal with. They exploited this opportunity and said, we're not going to participate in any of the company offsite. We're going to lock ourselves in a hotel room because we've just received early access to GPT-4, and we're just going to hack away in our hotel room and see what would it be like if we plugged in generative AI into Notion. And so the whole company gets back from this offsite, and on Monday morning, we have this mysterious Slack message showing us this whole demo workflow of they built this AI feature into Notion in just a couple of days. And just a few weeks later, we made our public announcement for Notion AI for the first time. It was at this point that I was brought in as the marketing guy, and my job was sort of, in 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it was, figure out pricing, figure out how we put this in front of all of our users, not just users on a wait list, and really put together a fully fledged general availability launch. I'm not really here to talk about generative AI today. I think we've all sort of seen really impressive generative AI workflows over the past year. But in Notion, the sort of benefit of having generative AI is having that ability to leverage generative AI in the place where you're actually working. Not a separate browser tab, not a separate tool, but AI that's sort of seamlessly built into where you're spending your time. Would love to share sort of my personal learnings from participating in this general availability launch for our generative AI launch. First and foremost is I thought I was really clever by coming up with this marketing messaging framework, which was work faster, write better, think bigger. And I think it's because I was so overwhelmed at just the breadth of all of these different use cases that you could use AI for. And so I wanted to categorize them. In reality, this messaging was way too general, and the number one feedback that we got from users after this launch was, wait, what do I use this thing for? I'm still kind of lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. And so if I had the opportunity to do it all over again, I would have made this messaging way less high level and way more in the weeds, more specific, more hands-on, and even actually giving people specific prompts and examples right from the marketing messaging. Secondly, I was really pleased in this launch that Notion made the right decisions for our customers as it pertained to AI security and AI privacy. We made good decisions in terms of our policies, but when you looked at our landing page and when you looked at our documentation, this was nowhere to be found. And if people went into our terms of service and read through all of the legalese, they would find oh, Notion's not using my data to train AI models. That's great. But what happened is that when people would ask questions about it, it immediately sort of put Notion on more of a defensive footing where we're sort of having to explain ourselves and say, no, you can trust us. It's all good here. So if I had the opportunity to do it all over again, I would have baked in the security and privacy messaging from the very, very beginning and been more proactive about it. Talk about it as a value proposition of using Notion rather than having to explain yourself later. Finally, I think there are a lot of trade-offs that come with speed of shipping. Now, in this particular launch, we shipped what was definitely an MVP product, and the number 1, 2, and 3 consideration was let's ship this thing super, super quickly. We had to make decisions really hastily. We had to have a really rigorous scope of what was possible in the product. There were a lot of trade-offs to shipping this thing so quickly, but I think if you are in the AI competitive landscape where it's a brand new ball game every single day, all of these trade-offs were worth it for that speed of shipping. So we shipped our generative AI product. We started to put it in front of our customers. And we started to hear one theme of feedback really, really clearly from our customers, which was, listen, every single person is spending all day with a lot of content in front of them. So do you have an AI solution that's more generally useful to everybody in the company and not just marketers, not just people on a content team? We heard this from literally every single customer conversation. And so we started to ask ourselves, how can we design an AI solution that's more broadly useful to everyone, regardless of their role? And we realized that there's a really important limitation with generative AI, which is that it's limited to only world knowledge when you're sending a prompt through a large language model that is trained on the public internet of broadly available information. Now, it sounds like having access to all world knowledge is all that you need. But in this case, your previous decisions or your roadmap, your Q4 OKRs based on performance. It was around this time to understand retrieval-augmented generation, we have to start with embeddings. Now, as you can imagine, we have Notion customers who have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of documents all in a single workspace together, all of their engineering tasks, all of their meeting notes, et cetera, et cetera. And what this embedding technology allowed for is taking all of that content and compressing it into this numerical sequence that we could store with Pinecone. And this really represented a shift from AI that understands world knowledge to AI that understands your knowledge. And so we changed the way that our AI was all of your company context, decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And this resulted in our launch of our latest AI feature called Q&A, which we introduced on a wait list just a few weeks ago. I think possibly one of my favorite use cases for a retrieval augmented generation workflow is, imagine you have just joined a project, but the project already been going on for 6 months and you're joining the project kind of late. And so now it's on you to sort of do here is we'll ask Q&A, what are the most important docs I should read about, I would get a useless output. But what's happening now is that my prompt is being filtered. Recently, was this doc created and last edited? How many people view this content? What is the general authority of these pages for the query that I typed? And now I've been given this prioritized list of documents that are relevant to the website redesign project. Or I could ask more specific questions like, what fonts do we use on the website? And again, taking my prompt, filtering it through the context of what's existing in my workspace or what my colleagues have generated in this workspace, and giving me instant answers to my questions. I'll end with one final example, which we'll come back to in just a couple of minutes. What was it? What has been our most successful marketing campaign to date? Now, there are some pros and cons to how we've built this retrieval augmented generation workflow. One of the benefits of having this embedding of all of your context means that if I ask it a question and no content exists to answer this question in the workspace, it's not going to hallucinate. It's not going to confidently invent an answer to what I've just asked if that content doesn't exist. And so very confidently it has said, look, I looked through the workspace. I don't see anything in here about any marketing or performance campaigns, so I don't know. That's a much better result than a hallucination. The downside is that it really depends on you having this content in your workspace. So we'll come back to that in just a minute. What does this look like for marketers in our day-to-day work? So I think there's a few different categories of questions that we can ask a retrieval augmented generation feature. First and foremost, as marketers, we want to stay in the loop. We want to stay really tight with our EPD partners, but we don't want to pepper them with questions all day, every day. And so this is sort of like having the ability to ask infinite questions against your EPD team 24/7 without ever having to bother them. So, what are the web team's priorities for the next quarter? Or what's the estimated launch date for the Android app? There's process questions like how do I questions. You can imagine how useful this would be when you're onboarding as a brand new employee in a new role. What's the process for onboarding a contractor? Or how do I request illustration assets? Finally, we don't know what we don't know, especially when you're sharing a Notion workspace with hundreds of other people who are all creating all of these documents and all this content that you may not even know it exists in the first place. But we can ask Q&A to fill our knowledge gaps for us. What are some of the most important docs that I should read from the user research team? Or again, what's been our most successful performance campaign to date? Now, that sort of brings me to what is required for all of this to work well. What's required for you to get good, high quality answers to all of these questions that I've just listed? First and foremost, it has to exist. You need to have your team knowledge actually written down. Doesn't have to be pretty. It's totally fine if it's messy or if it's unorganized. Having a really well-organized workspace is becoming less important because of the capabilities of retrieval augmented generation, but it has to exist in the first place. Secondly, Q&A does a pretty good job if you have duplicative information in the workspace where there's a more up-to-date version of the document. It should prioritize that more up-to-date version. But if all you have is the out-of-date stuff, then you're going to get the out-of-date stuff spit back out at you. Finally, let's say that you've built up all of your documentation, you have everything up to date, you've implemented a retrieval augmented generation workflow, and you're so excited to share it with all of your colleagues, and you're thinking, no one's going to ask a question in Slack ever again, everyone's going to be able to self-serve their own information. Let me tell you, just because a feature like this exists doesn't mean that it comes naturally. It is a completely new muscle memory, a completely new skill. When you have a question about something, to go ahead and use this tool instead of doing the easy thing, which is hopping on Slack, posting the question, pinging your colleagues, scheduling a meeting. This is what people are used to, and it will take time and practice to build this new muscle memory. I also wanted to share some learnings from a marketing perspective with you all about our retrieval augmented generation launch. First and foremost is I would have invested a little bit more in social proof. We published one customer story to complement this Q&A beta launch, and we are now using it like way too much. We're way too dependent on this one customer story. I should have invested a little bit more energy in having 3 customer stories, more quotes, more customer social proof. Second is that it's really important for us to start speaking the language of ROI with our customers. I've had to get a little bit more comfortable with this new sort of language, especially if your AI offering is not free. If it's going to cost extra, you're going to have to get used to talking to customers about, okay, show me the ROI. Where's the proof that if I purchase this extra AI feature that it's going to have an ROI for the business? And I think that we've been maybe a little too eager to give people free trials of Q&A without taking the time to really understand what are like the desired outcomes of you testing out this technology. What are the success metrics for what a successful trial looks like, rather than just giving people the free trial right away without taking the time to understand their needs. Finally, I learned in this launch that your sales team is your friend. I got a lot of value from forging better relationships, not just with sales leadership to really drive decisions, but getting close with sales ICs as well. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones on the front lines who are able to help you out with testing your messaging out in the field with your customers and helping you iterate. So what could be next after this? Please don't take this as a roadmap commitment, but more a musing of where things could go from here. You'll notice in this table that Notion has 2 categories of AI features today, one generative AI and one retrieval-augmented generation. And today they're like a Venn diagram that doesn't overlap at all. We have features that only use world knowledge, not your knowledge. And then we have another feature that only uses your knowledge and not world knowledge. You interact with them in different ways. They do different things for you. And so I think there's a really exciting future where these 2 sides of the Venn diagram start to overlap a little bit more, so that we're putting less onus on people to understand which type of AI feature they need to use for whatever they need help with. And what could that unlock exactly? So just a few ideas of where this could go from here. Being able to generate content, but not only generate content with the help of a large language model, but generate content with the help of the context from the rest of your content. So rewrite this draft that I wrote, making sure that it conforms to everything in this style guidelines doc. Prepare me a 30-minute meeting agenda to resolve all of the action items in last week's marketing leads meeting notes. Make it interesting to you every single day. I stuff